I apologize on that. We do apologize on that. We apologize. Here's the governor, or here's the
Americans suffering at the hands of illegal undocumented immigrants and the crime linked to them. Jeff? All right, Major, thanks very much. Dealing with a couple microphone issues there at the White House. So let's go over to Nancy Cordes right now, who was on Capitol Hill. Nancy, what are we about to hear from Democrats?
Well, they will argue, Jeff, that the president is manufacturing a crisis and exaggerating the numbers, that the number of illegal border crossings is actually way down
press a like
over
button,
the
like for
past
real.
10 years, and that while they want to put money into border security, a wall is simply a 13th century solution to a 21st century problem. And they know that privately, many Republicans agree with them, and that's why they are holding firm. They believe that the longer this drags on, the more Republicans they will be able to peel off, because many Republicans were never as passionate about this wall as the president was, but they've been out of party loyalty. But as this goes on, day after day, there are more and more federal workers, and every member of Congress is hearing from them, getting those calls from people who are wondering when they'll get paid, when they'll get their food stamps, and when they'll get housing assistance.
All right, Nancy, thanks very much. Major, is there a sense of how firmly or not Republicans are holding together?
Well, the vice president has been them to hold the line with the president.
Who doesn't like Donald Trump, y'all vote. I don't like Donald Trump. I do not. I repeat, I do not like Donald Trump. So everybody, y'all comment below if y'all hate Donald Trump.
In the House will hold the line, but as Nancy just indicated, House Democrats will put legislation on the floor of the House this week and next that will divide Republican ranks and provide opportunities to open up certain parts of the government. There'll be a behind-the-scenes effort here at the White House to keep those Republican defections to an absolute minimum. But there are those already here at the White House who imagine this thing playing out for weeks and Republicans possibly breaking ranks and the president having to veto something he doesn't support. And then we get into a veto override situation where Republican decisions about sticking with the president or not will be very dire indeed.
Major, thanks. Interesting to hear the president refer to this as a, quote, physical barrier. He said a steel barrier per a Democrat's request. Here's Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer.
Good evening. I appreciate to speak directly to the American people tonight about how we can end this shutdown and meet the needs of the American people. Sadly, much of what we heard from President Trump throughout this senseless shutdown has been full of misinformation and even malice. The president has chosen fear. We want to start with the facts. The fact is, on the very first day of this Congress, House Democrats passed Senate Republican legislation to reopen effective border security solutions. The president is rejecting these bipartisan bills, which would reopen government, over his obsession with forcing American taxpayers to waste billions of dollars on an expensive and ineffective wall, a wall he always promised Mexico would pay for. The fact is, President Trump has chosen to hold hostage critical services for the health, safety, and well-being of the American people and withhold the paychecks of 800,000 innocent workers across the nation, many of them veterans. He promised to keep government shut down for months or no matter whom it hurts. That's just plain wrong. The fact is, we all agree we need to secure our borders while honoring our values. We can build the infrastructure and roads at our ports of entry. We can install new technology to scan cars and trucks for drugs coming into our nation. We can hire the personnel we need to facilitate trade and immigration at the border. We can fund more innovation to detect unauthorized crossings. The fact is, the women and children at the border are not a security threat. They are a humanitarian challenge, a challenge that President Trump's own cruel and counterproductive policies have only deepened. And the fact is, President Trump must stop holding the American people, must stop manufacturing a crisis on the government. Thank you. Peter Schumer.
Thank you, Speaker Pelosi. My fellow Americans, we address you tonight for one reason only. The President of the United States, having failed to get Mexico to pay for his ineffective, unnecessary border wall, and unable to convince the American people to foot the bill, has shut down the government. American democracy doesn't work that way. We don't govern by temper tantrum. No president should pound the table and demand he gets his way, or else the government shuts down, hurting millions of Americans who are treated as leverage. Tonight, and throughout this debate and throughout his presidency, has appealed to fear, not facts, division, not unity. Make no mistake, Democrats and the president both want stronger border security. However, we sharply disagree with the president about the most effective way to do it. So, how do we untangle this mess? Well, there's an obvious solution. Separate the shutdown from argument. There is bipartisan legislation supported by Democrats and Republicans to reopen government while allowing debate over border security to continue. There is no excuse for hurting millions of Americans over a policy difference. Federal workers are about to miss a paycheck. Some families can't get a mortgage to buy a new home. Farmers and small businesses won't get loans they desperately need. Most presidents have used Oval Office addresses for noble purposes. This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis, stoke fear, and divert attention from the turmoil in his administration. My fellow Americans, there is no challenge so great that our nation cannot rise to meet it. We can reopen the government and continue to work through disagreements over policy. We can secure our border without an ineffective, expensive wall. And we can welcome legal immigrants and refugees without compromising safety and security. The symbol of America should be the Statue of Liberty, not a 30-foot wall. So our suggestion is a simple one. Mr. President, reopen the government and we can work to resolve our differences over border security, but end this shutdown now. Thank you.
The Minority Leader and the Speaker of the House delivering their response to the first presidential address from the Oval Office, which immediately preceded that. Nancy Pelosi said the president is holding the American people hostage. Chuck Schumer said he is governing by temper tantrum and stoking fear. Ed O'Keefe is here on the set. Ed, I don't think I heard anything tonight to indicate we're any closer to a solution.
Not at all. Look, we heard from a president held in low regard by most Americans, touting a policy proposal held in low regard by most Americans. And tonight, based on what we just heard, is all about posturing. I heard nothing specific from either side on some kind of a compromise that could potentially break this logjam starting tomorrow. Part of the problem is that they can't agree on the facts. Now, we could spend hours going over the facts that are shared by either side, but we should call out some of them. The president tonight, for example, saying that 20,000 children were found crossing the border illegally last month. Not quite. According to the Customs and Border Protection, 4,982 unaccompanied minors were apprehended in October, about 5,200 in November, and family units is how Customs and Border Protection defines it, about 23,115. So he talks about children. In fact, it's members of families who cross the border. It's that kind of tweaking of facts that is aggravating Democrats and making it very difficult for them to come to some kind of agreement with the president.
The numbers are important. Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill. Nancy, tomorrow afternoon, do we have an indication that something might happen, that progress might be made? What happens tomorrow?
Well, here's what House Democrats are going to start doing, Jeff, and this is a tactic that Republicans know well because they tried it when they were in the minority in a similar situation. They're going to start holding votes on reopening these closed agencies one by one and basically daring Republicans to join them. They'll be able to make the case, look, we Democrats are trying to reopen government and Republicans are standing in the way. So it'll be very interesting to see how many Republicans they'll be able to pick off. The president is coming here here to Capitol Hill to try to keep those losses to a minimum. But just tonight, Alaska Republican Lisa Murkowski became the third Republican senator to say, you know what, perhaps we should reopen the rest of the government while we continue to debate these serious issues. You have Republican senators who are up for re-election in 2 years, who are worried about what their constituents will think because they have federal workers and many other Americans who are being affected by this shutdown. And you have senators who are looking at seeing the writing on the wall and realizing that these two sides are so far apart and have made no progress towards meeting each other in the middle. So right now, it's very difficult to see what kind of solution could be negotiated.
Major, is there the possibility of a solution or an increased possibility of a solution by Friday, given that that is the first day that many of these Americans, the government workers, would not be getting paychecks?
There's no sign of it here, Jeff. The White House believes that it can not only hold Republicans or a sufficient number of Republicans in line, and that over time, and this is the White House theory, I'm not saying it's true, but it's the theory that White House advisors, starting with the president on down, believe that this shutdown, the longer it goes, will pressure Democrats, not Republicans. What is that theory based on? An assumption the president has, he said many times out loud. Most federal workers, he believes, are Democrats. How he knows that, no one here at the White House can quite explain. But that he believes it is certain. And he believes those Democratic federal workers, he so calls them, will put pressure on Democratic members of the House and Senate. The House and Senate Democratic leaders I've talked to or their aides don't buy that at all. And based on the reaction you saw tonight from Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer, they appear unified and entrenched on their position.
Ed, go ahead. By Friday, I think by our math, it would become, after Friday, the longest government shutdown ever.
Yes, because the one in the 1990s lasted a little more than 20 days, and by Friday it will be. And today, at least at the Department of Homeland Security, was the day by which paychecks had to be processed. So at this point, there are at least a few thousand federal employees across the country who know for certain they will not be paid on Friday, even if for some reason there was a resolution tomorrow night. One of the things to keep in mind when it comes to talking about the federal workforce, 85% of federal employees work somewhere far outside Washington, D.C. They work in red districts, they work in blue districts. And to think that by the end of the week, members of both parties won't be hearing from them is silly. They will be. Large cities across the country are built around federal infrastructure, and this has a huge effect across the country.
They've made some maneuvers to make accommodations for some of these folks to pay who wouldn't have, but that's not easy.
No, and it's funny. That's partly in response to what the House is starting to do now. You heard yesterday the Treasury Department is going to bring back some IRS personnel to start processing refunds because House Democrats are set to vote on legislation that would essentially reopen the Treasury Department. So the White House trying to get ahead of Congress through executive action and say, don't worry, we don't need you to do it. We'll do it ourselves. Similarly, there's some issues with food stamps. Today, the Agriculture Secretary was forced to come out and say, we've got enough to go through February. It's an issue if we get to March. But if we're still having this argument in March, that's quite a dispute.
Yes, I would say so. Let's listen to a little bit of what we just heard from the president.
Imagine if it was your child, your husband, or your wife, whose life was so cruelly shattered and totally broken. To every member of Congress, pass a bill that ends this crisis. To every citizen, call Congress and tell them to finally, after all of these decades, secure our border. This is a choice between right and wrong, justice and injustice. This is about whether we fulfill our sacred duty to the American citizens we serve. When I took the oath of office, I swore to protect our country. And that is what I will always do. So help me God.
Okay, that's the president. That was toward the end of his speech. He made this appeal to families, saying, "Imagine if you were in this situation." We do have Maria Villarreal now. She is near the border tonight and watched with some other folks who watched in McAllen, Texas, where the president is planning to go still on Thursday. Although I don't recall him mentioning that in the speech. Maria, what did folks think of it there?
Well, Jeff, as of right now, what you're really looking at is the idea that this is a fairly blue area. Okay, listen, I just was told right now that they have not elected a Republican person here in this area for over 100 years. So clearly this skews towards the Democrats. But as we listened into the president's speech, talk to the people here, I think what is very clear is they do see and feel a need for border security in Valley. And there is no doubt, I think, that supports that. But what you're going to see is a big divisiveness between law enforcement, between elected officials. A lot of elected officials here, over a dozen different cities, have said that they will not support a border wall, but they will support border security. So clearly they feel they need funds here to continue to support the influx of migrants that is coming across the border. They need the money to continue to support law enforcement. But what we are hearing from people that just watched the president speak is that they want to see more support, more unity between the two different parties here. I think that there is a feeling that while a few years ago when we had President Obama asking for money for border security, for a border wall, there was a lot of support there. But now that we have President Trump in office, that there's just not support for him as a person, not necessarily him as a Republican or him as the president of the United States. The one day between now and obviously President Trump's potential trip here to the Rio Grande Valley, is there still that one day? There is hope that there will be some sort of discussions between the two sides in the next 24 hours.
All right, Maria, thank you very much from McAllen, Texas. Nancy Cordes, when the sides were talking, was there any consensus about a potential number between 0 and 5.7 billion on how much they might possibly agree on, if at all?
Well, that was part of the problem. Democrats say that the number kept changing, that the vice president, for example, would float 2.5 billion, and then the president would say, no, he actually wants 5.7 billion. And then a day later, he would say, actually, he wants even more money for additional border security. That's the reason Democrats say they don't think that these negotiations are going anywhere. And beyond that, they believe that there's a tactical consideration here as well, that if they treat this like a normal negotiation and continue to work with the president, that this will only encourage him to use this kind of approach.
Nancy Cordes, thanks very much. Ed O'Keefe, quickly. Final thoughts.
We'll see how that meeting goes tomorrow, but there's really no sign of resolution. Vicente Gonzalez is the congressman for the area where Murray is. He told us a little while ago on CBSN he considers this a 4th century solution to a 21st century problem. And in a sign of how little engagement there is with Democrats, the White House hasn't even invited him to tag along on Thursday to his home district.
But you talked to some of the people with Murray, some of these arguments that unfortunately at times, sometimes I think gets lost. Ed O'Keefe here on the set with us, Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill, Major Garrett at the White House, and also Maria Villarreal down on the border. We thank you all. For some of you in the West, the CBS Evening News is next. For most, CBS primetime programming follows. CBS News coverage continues on our 24-hour digital network, CBSN. I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, I'm Jeff Glor, CBS News in New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com.
Yeah, I just heard about y'all just heard what Donald Trump said. I just heard that, it's crazy how we all think, what Donald Trump is, but this is like speaking about that issue. I think we all need to vote. Y'all saw people struggling and trying to come over that wall. Y'all saw that, saw Donald Trump saying that he's trying to protect people, but really ain't. So everybody, let's just hope that he gets knocked down or something happens, because obviously his issues of being president has really downgraded, and what doesn't make sense at the point that President Trump needs to get out of office. I think everybody knows that he needs to get out of the office because there's some sense of a wall, and people say he has accomplished so many things that's not even possible true. He has not accomplished nothing. Besides that, y'all seen that, and that's what I wanted to show tonight about when he was speaking. Of course, again, y'all, I hope y'all will understand. See that. Of course, again, y'all share my stuff, and y'all do share my stuff, y'all do subscribe, and y'all do see the link, of course, again, y'all. And yes, y'all, thank y'all again. I have 48 subscribers, y'all. I'm trying to get more, y'all. I'm trying to get to 1,000, y'all. And just make that reality, y'all. Let's all make that reality. See, it's trying to get to 1,000. So everybody, I want this challenge is for a week. And I'm gonna be doing. And like I said, y'all, share, subscribe, and please don't find me boring. Like I said, I'm very entertaining, more fun to do. I'm real fun to speak to. I'm real fun, y'all. I'm real entertaining, y'all. Real entertaining. Everybody, like I said. So everybody, like I said, that do subscribe, that do watch, you do hit the like button, and of course, again, y'all. Of course, huge shout out to Eddie Anime Life 56. Shout out to Carter. Shout out to everybody who commented, and shout out to everybody who subscribed. Yo, and I do want to mention, I can't remember the gamer name, but subscribers, y'all. So everybody, like I said, y'all do subscribe, y'all do share my stuff, and don't forget, Legacy has more stuff to do. Like I said, tomorrow I don't know if I want to do it or not, but y'all vote for yes or no on this. If I should go do the Bird Box Challenge Part 2 in the highway blindfolded. So y'all vote for yes or no on that one. So everybody, like I said, y'all, Legacy is out.